The value of human life. How we treat others determines how we even treat ourselves. It determines how we treat the poor, the handicapped, the unborn, the infirm, the dying. And not to even mention maybe that person that we're having an argument with. The value of human life. That question is fundamental. And we might ask ourselves, where does that value, where does it even come from? Why does human life, why does it have worth at all? To put it in kind of a nutshell, human life has value just as gold has value. And let me illustrate this to you. There was a man by the name of Martin Gilbert, and he wrote a book called The Holocaust. It's a book about those who were in a concentration camp during World War II. And it's about one particular prisoner. Before this man was arrested, he lived in Holland, and he was a jeweler. The Nazis, they robbed him of all of his possessions except for just a few tiny pieces of gold that he was able to smuggle into that concentration camp that he was in. And he hoped one day that he would survive that camp, and with those few pieces of gold, that he would be able to begin his life anew. But as those days went on, as the labor was tough and hard, and very little food was given, the man grew hungrier and hungrier, thinner and thinner. And one day he pulled that gold from his pocket, and he showed it to one of the guards, and he asked him, he said, "What is this worth to you?" The next day, the guard would return and pull from his pocket 2 potatoes that were shriveled and half rotten. The man gave him the gold in exchange for those 2 rotten potatoes, and he quickly ate them. Martin Gilbert commented that the exchange represents a precise scale of worth. In that concentration camp, just a few scraps of food, just tiny rotten potatoes, were more valuable to that man than that gold. What we see here is gold that has value because the price someone's willing to pay for it. Something similar applies to the value of human life. This Sunday, we hear the price someone is willing to pay for our human life. The price that someone's willing to pay for your life, that they're willing to pay for my life. When John the Baptist saw Jesus coming, he said, "Behold, behold the Lamb of God." In the Old Testament each year, they used to select a lamb, a young male sheep. He was to be a year old, and the reason they picked it was because the meat of that lamb would have been tender and its wool would have been most valuable at that age. Each family who could afford it would offer a young lamb for the sacrifice. That priest would place the lamb on the altar, would slit its throat so that the blood could be poured out as a sin offering for the people. They would be restored back to God because of the sacrifice of the lamb. And when John saw Jesus coming, he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." Like a young sheep placed on an altar, Jesus would give his own blood as he died on the cross for you and me. His life, he would give it for us That's the greatest price. Why? Because Jesus is perfectly man and he's perfectly God, and he would give his life, his own blood, for you and me. If you were to ask where our value comes from, you would have to say, it's not because of our intelligence. It's not because of our charm, our good looks, our beauty, or how strong we are. We have some of those qualities, but we all know that they quickly wane, they quickly go away. Ultimately, our worth does not come from our brilliance, our virtue, our beauty, or our strength. We have value as human beings because someone was willing to pay the price for us. It's important for us to say that today we live in a society confused about the value of human life. For example, someone finds their life maybe worthless. Maybe they've gotten up there in age and they see no value in their life anymore. And they turn to the medical profession and they call it death with dignity. What value's there? As Christians, we can't do that. We know that their life has incredible value because one person was willing to pay the price for us. Someone was willing to pay that enormous price for it. The Lamb of God paid the price. We, of course, want to do what we can to ease the other person's discomfort. We want to help them in their suffering. Well, we don't believe that suffering is absurd, that suffering doesn't have value in it. We can join our suffering to the Lamb of God. We can offer that suffering along with his. In fact, in his encyclical Spes Salve, "In Hope We Are Saved," Pope Benedict talked about the importance of offering our daily trials in union with Christ. Some of you may remember the old morning offerings. I offer you all my joys, sufferings of this day, offering them with Christ as a sacrifice. What a person endures for the sake of Christ, it can have great value. This applies particularly to the suffering involved in one's final illness and those last moments of our life. What a great sacrifice to offer those sufferings to our God. This message is hard to proclaim, though. Many people today don't want to hear it. We don't want to suffer. We don't want life to be any harder. That each human life has incredible worth, even in the face of great suffering. As Christians, we know we have been purchased at a high price. God paid the price. For sure, there are natural reasons for valuing human life, but ultimately, our human life has value for the same reason that gold has value. This Sunday, St. John the Baptist tells us the price, and the price that one was willing to pay for it. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. What a price he paid, and that's why you and I have great value.